दिक्कत hello. So we have been trying to make an assessment of how one can make a portrait and largely a caricature of people. So the 14th century England stands out before us in this prologue, where Chaucer has worked his double purpose of presenting the state and the church. We see them not just as characters of the 14th century England, but we all see them as characters living as our contemporaries, and part of them we see in ourselves as well. Because humor for Chaucer was not just the device to make people laugh, but as the ancient understanding stood, was that humor is the four essential elements that exist in us of hot, cold, moist, and dry. So his characters are a balance of these four and largely a distortion of these four. So we continue now. He now presents to us a Franklin. A Franklin was in his company. White was his beard, as is a daisy. So Franklin is farmer who owns a very big land. A landlord who has a very big land under his charge, his own, and on which he has lesser people to work. So a Franklin was there in his company, and white was his beard, as is a daisy. So you can just see the cartoon image of this Franklin with a patterned beard. Of his complexion he was sanguine, well loved he by the morrow a sop in wine. So complexion was red, dark. He was a dark-skinned man, which amply suggests that he should have started his career as a farmer himself, but with his acquaintances rose to the high esteem of being a Franklin. And what suggests his prosperity, that he loved by the morrow. The early thing in the morning that he did was a sop in wine. So he used to wash himself, his throat, with a sop of wine. Luxury is elemental to many of the characters in prologue. To live in delight was ever his one, for he was Epicurus' own son. So his one. One means his choice. His only choice in life was to live in delight. So this man, because he is very rich, because he is a man who loves wine, so the one who has wine early in the morning should be the man who should be living only for sheer delight to live. And he was Epicurus' own son. Epicurus is the god of wine. So much of wine he used to consume that it appeared that he was Epicurus' own son. So this epithet itself is suggestive, a very small expression which is going to round off the character of the Franklin who loves to drink. So he was Epicurus' own son that held opinion that plain delight was verily felicity perfect. So the only thing, verily is the only thing, felicity is making oneself happy. So the only thing that could make one happy and profitable and perfect life was that one should live in plain delight. So I think every sage would tell you to live happy, because if you are happy, you love to live. And this man is also happy like a sage is, but a distortion of the sage is he, because he loves first to have wine as his introduction to the morning. a householder, and that a great was he. Saint Julian, he was in his country. So he was a very big householder. Here, householder doesn't mean that he has a big family. A householder means that he has several people to work under him, and he possesses a very big house, and that a great. So his house was a very great one. And Saint Julian, see, he is Epicurus' son and he is Saint Julian. The parallelism that Chaucer brings about of his characters with the saints at once launches us to believe that they are opposite of that. Chaucer's humor lies in the fact that every time he will hold a character to ridicule, he would be doing so with great solemnity by placing them as parallel to those who are just the opposite of that. So Saint Julian was a saint known for his charity. He had his lodgings on a place where travelers passed, and to rid them of their anxiety about hunger and thirst, he always lavishly treated the travelers. So he was the Saint Julian in his country. His bread, his ale was always after one. So the bread that he had in his house and the drink that he had was always number one. A better envied man was nowhere known. So he was the most enviable of all people there, because anyone in would be entertained profusely. Without baked meat was never his house, of fish and flesh, and that so plenteous it snowed in his house of meat and drink. So without baked meat never was his house. He had several. Now if he should be having fresh baked animal on the table, that means he should be rearing animals also. So what animals? Fish and flesh. And that was so plenteous. So much it was there that it appeared as if it was snowing in his house. And what was snowing? Meat and drink. Of all dainties, and not just meat and drink, but all dainties that men could think. So this man is really a profusely rich man. And not that he keeps it all for himself, he keeps it for the visitors that he has. And all this meat and drink after the sundry seasons of the year. According to the seasons, he used to change the ale and the meat. So changed he his meat and his supper. Full many a fat partridge had he in the mew, and many a bream, and many a loose in the stew. So he had several birds in his mews, in the cages, fat partridges, which are supposed to be a delicacy to stand on the table, and many a bream and loose. These are fish that he maintained in his own very personal pond. So he had them, and the stew, that is a kind of broth, a kind of semi-solid food, which is largely liquid, was there, and it contained the birds, fresh birds and the fresh fishes. Woe was his cook, but if his sauce were pungent and sharp, and ready all his gear. So his cook had to face woe, W-O-E, is suffering. His cook was subjected to greatest ridicule and rebuff if the sauces were not pungent and sharp. So the sauces that were made were very pungent. He was a man who was after the spices because he had a spiced conscience. And ready all his gear. So the table must always be laid with all the gear, all the cutlery and the crockery and everything ready, and the food also. His table dormant in the hall always stood ready covered all the long day. And the table was dormant. It couldn't be moved. It was so heavily laid with food and everything, all the gear, all day long. And why? Because, let's see, at sessions there was he lord and sire. So this is a parallelism of the today's world. The one who entertains people over food in their house ensure a kind of relation that is going to bring them profit. So the table on which he served the partridges and the leeks and the fish, so that earned him at the titles of Lord and Sire. Whenever there were big parties to be held, he was given the title of a Lord and the Sire. Full oftentime he was Knight of the Shire. Shire is city. So he was a knight. Not only was he given the lordship and the siredom, he was also given the knighthood. He was unduly given the due of being understood as the bravest man, because it surely involves bravery to be able to serve people at all times and in all seasons. And unless an gypsy roll of silk hung at his girdle. So there was a big purse and all made of silk, white as morning milk. So matching with his beard was his purse. White beard and the white purse. And white, we all know, symbolizes a kind of charity. A sheriff had been and a contour was nowhere such a worthy Vazavar. Vazavar is purchaser of land. So he was also a sheriff. Sheriff is the judge. When things cannot be decided on an ordinary scale, then they are taken to the most respectable person of the town. And he, with his servants, had turned out to acquire the titles of the Lord and the Sire and the Knight and a sheriff also and a countor. Countor is the man whose counsel is sought in every possible matter. So he was therefore such a worthy Vazavar. Chaucer is wanting to tell you the dictum that if you put in something from your own part, you can win large fortunes. And this Franklin is an example of this dictum. He used to share his fortunes and in return was endowed with fortunes of immense magnitude. This rounds off the character of the Franklin. And now, taking all the rich people was not the purpose of Chaucer. If he is a representative, he will take people not only from the rich class, but he will also have people from the lower class. But then, as I told you, it was a 30-way towards and 30-way backwards journey. So the people who were not very proficient enough in their purses would not be able to afford the 60 days journey. So there are the guilds person, people from the various lower crafts, but of the lower crafts, these are the ones who are immensely large because they are the employers of the similar kind who are poor. So there was a haberdasher, a carpenter, a weaver, a dyer, and a tapestrer. Haberdasher is the one who provides with clothes. Carpenter does the woodcraft. Weaver is cloth making. Dyer is coloring. And tapestrer is coarse cloth making to make the tapestry, that is the curtains. And they were clothed all in a lever of a solemn and a great fraternity. Underline this. You know, when you are going with people of high cadre, you have every likelihood to being lost there. So, avoiding the possibility of being lost, they had come in a great fraternity. Their clothes were all of a kind, just as in ancient times, parents who were not very well off would bring a big piece of cloth and with that make dresses for all the children in the home. So the same fraternity, Chaucer is rather having fun at the manners of these people, that they are very solemn and of great fraternity. Full fresh and new their gears apiked was. So the dresses and the things that they were wearing were full fresh. They had just purchased them right now. They had not come into some old clothes so as to impose their legitimacy to claim as being the pilgrims. Their knives were shaped capped not with brass, but all with silver. So the knives also, uh, we'll discuss it later. What are the recurrent images and symbols in prologue? And one of the recurrent symbols is the knives. They have to keep security of their own selves. They are coming with sums to sustain them for a 60-day journey. Therefore, they have knives which are capped not with brass. The handles of these knives are not of brass, but all with silver. Wrought full clean and well their girdles and their pouches also. So, very clean and shining girdles they had put in, the rings in their arms, and the pouches, the purses that they had brought were all shining. Well seemed each of them a fair bourgeois to sit in a guild's hall on a days. So they really appeared fitly characters to sit as bourgeois. Bourgeois is upper class, upper genteel class. So when they sat in the guild's hall, naturally they belonged to the guildsmen. Guildsmen are working class people, but they were best among them. They were the heads of their own fraternity. Avarice, for the wisdom that he can, was shapely for to be an alderman. Average, each of them for the wisdom that he had, for all the wisdom that they had of their craft was shapely. It provided them an accordance to be an alderman, to be the best of among their creed. For cattle had they enough and rent. So they had all of them had cattle, animals, to provide them with the milk and to do errands for them, and rent means they had put their animals and their belongings on hire also. And also their wives would it well assent. So not only they, but their wives also assumed the airs of being classy. And else certain were they to blame, it is full fair to be called madam. So they made it certain, and only they were to blame if they did not see to it that fairly they have been called, Cleptus called madam. So they, among their own creed, got themselves to be called as madam. So there is a feigning by these guildsmen. They have come in the best of their form. And not only they, when Chaucer must have talked to them, they must have talked about their wives as madam. And go to vigils all before and have a mental rush bore. Now this is a cult that was prevalent at that time. People who were rich, they used to go to vigils. Vigils are night waking ceremonies, either in the moments of joy or in the moments of misery. So when people wake all night, either to celebrate something or to mourn something, those are vigils. So when their wives went to the vigils, they had their mental royals bore. You must have seen that when a girl is getting married, the robe that she wears, the back of it drags on the earth, but which it's very long that it would drag on the earth, but there are people escorting her, her friends who hold this dress high up. That is called bearing the royal mantle. Mantle is the long cloak, royal rich cloak that the ladies used to wear, and they had their mantles borne, the royal mantles borne. So this is the show off. Because they had risen in their own stature from among their own class, so they were assuming the airs that were courtly. And courtly love is integral to nearly, leaving aside a few, the 4 or 5 good characters, everyone is in love with courtly manners. Continuing with the lesser classes, we now have a cook. A cook they had with them for the nonce. So they had not come alone, they had brought their cook. To show that they were rich enough, there was a cook. To boil the chickens with the marrow-bones, and poured merchant tart and gillinghale. So this cook was perfect in what? In all the tasks that a cook should know. He would boil the chicken with the marrow-bones, and he would make tart with all the powders and gillinghale drinks. Well could he know a draught of London ale. So this cook was perfect. He knew his craft so well that from among all the drinks that were there, he would tell which was the best of its kind. You must have seen that when it comes to finding out which is the best oil for cooking or which is the best recipe, you call the experts. And Mrs. Tarla Dalal, if she says that this is the finest of the ghee, we all believe because it is Mrs. Tarla Dalal telling us. So also, this cook was an expert. He could tell by the smell of things which was the best of the kind, and not only would he decide which was the best of the kind, he could roast and seethe and boil and fry, make murda and well bake a pie. So he could roast, he could seethe. Seethe is to saute the food in oil and with spices, and he could boil things and he could fry things and he could make the best recipes and he could bake a pie. But great harm was it, as it taught me, that on his chin a mommel had he. So he said that with this such a good cook that he was, still he had an individuality. And what was that? There was a harm, there was a problem with him, as Chaucer thought, because on his chin he had a scar, a mommel, a big wound. For black manger that made he with the best, because he had been doing too much of baking that he was expert at, and this had caused him to have that wound on his chin. Now we come to yet another character. A shipman was there, winning far by west. So there is also a shipman. We'll see why he has come for a pilgrimage. He had come winning. Winning is coming far by west. He had come from some very western land. For aught I know, he was of Dartmouth. So he had come from the place called Dartmouth. He rode upon a Rounsey as he could. Because he is a shipman. He is a shipman you would never see riding a horse. And this is beyond his capacity to make an assessment which is the best horse. So he had come upon a Rounsey. Now what is Rounsey? Rounsey is a kind of horse that moves with jerky, which has a jerky movement. So although it looks very good, it looks very sturdy. So this shipman has the understanding only of his trade, and he did not know which horse to buy. So he came on a Rounsey as he Means as he could, it was very difficult for him. He was finding a tough time sitting on this horse in a gown of folding to the knee. And you can see the shipman very well that the gown, he had bought a big gown for him, but again he lifted up to his knee and tied it around his waist. So the gown was folding to the knee. A dagger hanging on a lass had he, and daggers are very natural for a shipman to keep, so he also had a dagger hanging on a lass about his neck. But you know, it was not hanging on his side, as a shipman always carries his gear hanging on his neck, so it was also hanging by his neck under his armor down, and deep down any moment he would produce his knife to make better the attack that might have accorded to him. A hot summer had made his hue all brown. So, moving on ships and moving on waters had caused his complexion to become very dark in color. And certainly he was a good fellow, because Chaucer's pilgrims cannot be bad fellows. So, certainly he is a good fellow. He is of the fraternity of the pilgrims. And why is he a good fellow? Not only because he has come to in the fraternity of the pilgrims, but because full many a draught of wine had he draw from Bordeaux ward, while that the chapman's slave. Now he is a thief as well. Full many a draught of wine. He used to steal wine when he was coming from the Bordeaux wards, the place from where they used to buy the best wine. From there, when the chapman, the keeper, was asleep, he would steal the wine. Of nice conscience took he no keep, and he was not at all bothered to have a nice conscience. Why should he? If the monk is not keeping his conscience clean, why would this man do? He is a shipman already, facing dangers. And it is just legitimate for a man who is facing dangers to give danger in return for what is accorded to him. So, of nice conscience took he no keep. It did not matter to him that he should have a nice conscience. If that he fought and had the higher hand, by water he sent them home to every land. So, if the chapman woke and someone caught him stealing, then what he did, he used to fight and had always the upper hand. He always proved himself very strong, and he would send the man directly through waters to heaven or hell that he might swim across to. कोई खतरा नहीं लेना है, पानी के ऊपर खतरा है, पानी में ही भेज देना है. So he would do that, and he would send them to their land. But you shouldn't think that he's a madman, because Chaucer's people are not bad, but of his craft to reckon well his tides. So if you ask about his craft, because they are the best of the kind, so he could reckon is identify. He could identify what was the time that tides would be up. His streams, he knew all the streams, the undercurrents in the water, and his dangers him besides. He could face all dangers. His harbor and his moon. So he managed the harbor and he managed the moon, because at night it's always the moon that will tell you the direction, and it is the moon that will tell you when the tide would be up or would it be low. And then he could manage his load accordingly. Whatever much of load he was bringing, he was a perfect shipman, if a bad man, but he was a very good shipman. So he could manage all the load. There was none such from Hull to Carthage. He was the best there. Hardy he was and wise to undertake. If you talk to him, he knew everything very well. With many a tempest had his beard been shake. So, just as we say that we've seen several seasons, so also we should say the shipman had seen several tempests. He knew all the havens as they were, from Gutland to the Cape of Finisterre. So he knew all the havens. Havens are night lodges, some kind of small islands which were there on the sea. And every creek in Britain and in Spain, his barge was called Madeleine. So he knew all the creeks. Creeks are the small narrow passages into the lands where one can have rest overnight. So he knew every creek in Britain and in Spain. So where was the place that he journeyed from? He journeyed from Britain to Spain. And Chaucer perforce doesn't tell his name. He says that is barge. Barge is the ship. His ship was called Magdalene. He had given one of the very graceful and a courtly name to his ship, because it was the ship that had brought to him all that luck to be integral to this train or troop of pilgrims that were moving to Canterbury. And we all know the Saint Thomas Becket is going to redeem them from the physical ailments, and this man has the moral ailment of having sent several people by the sea. Thank you. This is all for today. We shall continue.